From time to time, we get questions that aren't quite big enough for an actual deep dive. So I've got 10 of those gathered here, and we're gonna answer them today. Let's dive right in. First question we have was posted with our off contact video. Do you also need to adjust the tilt on your print head after changing your off contact? The answer is both yes and no. If when you're adjusting your off contact, imagine this hand is the platen, this is the screen. If you're adjusting your off contact, of course, part of that off contact is making sure your screen is in plane, meaning it's evenly off the platen in all four corners. Now, if your screen, of course, the print head is tilted down a little bit, then yeah, we need to adjust that tilt. If you find that your tilt is up a little bit, then you need to adjust that tilt down so that it's in plane. Now, if you are adjusting your tilt and you're having a hard time getting it to be perfectly in plane, you can err on the side of caution and have that front of your screen up just a little bit. So as you pull the squeegee this way, the front of your screen, you're standing here, as long as that screen is up just a little bit, you're fine. If your screen is ever tilted down, then you absolutely want to change that tilt. Next question we have is, do you lift the screen before flooding? I have recently watched some very experienced printers, as well as absolute beginners, go through this recently. They decided not to lift the screen, and because the off contact was pretty close, it's that 1/16th to an 1/18th of an inch off of the garment, they flooded with the screen in the down position. They immediately flinched and cringed a little bit, and we said, stop, lift your screen, and you could see the ghost image that was on the shirt because of the flood. The flood was just hard enough that you were able to get the screen to touch the garment, and you had an image printed there. So yes, the answer is always lift your screen before you flood so that you do not end up getting a double image on your garment, and your prints are always flawless as a result. This was a question on our Squeegee Durometer video. Specifically, is the Durometer as effective in a push stroke versus pull stroke? I'm guessing that the ink shear may be the same, but the force applied would be the variable. In essence, what you're looking for is when you're doing a push stroke, your biggest concern, your biggest issue is going to be just making sure your angles are correct and that you're able to apply enough pressure as a result. When you're looking at the durometer of a squeegee blade, you're specifically looking at how hard that blade is and of course how well that blade will shear as a result, meaning cutting that ink, and in cutting that ink, how thin that ink deposit is going to be. While that squeegee blade itself does the majority of the work for cutting the ink and how much it won't flex during the push or the pull stroke, the other part of that, of course, is your angle and your pressure applied. If your angle is if straight up is 0, if you've got an angle going over to 30 to 45 degrees, even on a very hard squeegee, you can still lay down an appreciable level of ink, an appreciable amount of ink. So on a push stroke, your biggest challenge is going to be getting down enough to get that ink to shear the way you want it to when you're using a harder squeegee. And what I mean by that is, imagine there's a screen here and you're pushing the ink this way. In order to get the same effect of a squeegee at 5 to 10 degree angle, straight up, just a little tilt, while you're pushing, you need to be at 5 to 10 degrees up off of your screen if you're pushing to get that same applied angle. So that's where pushing a squeegee starts to really lose its ergonomical benefits. And that's your primary reason for pushing a squeegee. It's easier on the body. But when it comes into detailed work, shearing, all the rest of it, using a harder squeegee, you're using a lot more force with those squeegee blades than you need, where pulling a squeegee allows you to have a lot more finesse in what you're doing, a lot more control overall. Is a durometer as effective? Well, when you're pushing, you're already kind of locked in at least a 30 to 40 degree angle. It's very challenging to get down to those sharper angles. And the durometer of your squeegee blade doesn't really matter at that point because there's not much you can do for applying pressure. So this next question, if you were to post this on Facebook forums, you'll probably get 200 replies. and all of them saying that the other person's an idiot. What is the best mesh count for the best white underbase, and how many print strokes do you need? The best mesh count is the one that you can consistently print through, and the number of print strokes is however many it takes for you to get a good white. You know, that's your blanket statement. Now in that, if you have to print through an 86 mesh and you have to do 4 print strokes in order for it to look good, well, while that's good for you, it's not good for the overall print because you have way too much ink down. If we're talking about getting to a point where you have a nice thin layer that feels good on the garment, covers the garment, meaning the white looks white on a black garment, then you're up typically around a 156, maybe as low as a 110, and 2 print strokes. But you're using a flood print and a flood print in order to achieve that. The answer itself is open-ended to whatever your tools are, how good your tools are. Do you have high tension? Do you have sharp squeegees? Are you using a very inexpensive ink that may not cover very well or clear the screen? Or are you using a really good ink that allows you to print with minimal pressure and get that ink on top of the shirt instead of into the shirt when you pull the squeegee? Another variable, are you using thin thread? If you're using thin thread, you get to use even less pressure, and you can use a very mediocre ink and get fantastic coverage because the mesh is helping you. So again, very open-ended question, and the answer is really what works best for you is what's best. Now, if you want to chase an ideal situation, then you need to improve your tools that you're using along with your skill set. Can you mix standard cure inks and low cure inks on the same print? The answer is yes, absolutely no problem. Anytime this has been asked in the past, the question is always, are the standard cure inks your top colors and the low cure the bottom color, or is the low cure the top colors and the standard cure the bottom color? In the end, it doesn't really matter, but there is a small nuance in which we're talking about how fast the ink is going through the dryer. You know, if you've got that print in there for 15, 20 seconds, you're gonna wanna look at it a little harder if it's a standard cure on top and low cure on the bottom. Everything may not hit temperature if it's low cure on the top and standard cure on the bottom. You know, again, it's very minor. The odds are you've got a full cure on that one, where the other one you're gonna wanna take a hard look. But otherwise, yeah, as long as everything reaches cure temperature for the ink deposit that it is, you're golden. And a good follow-up to that one is, can you overcure ink? The short answer is yes. The long answer is your t-shirt's gonna catch fire first. To technically overcure ink, you need to get that ink deposit hot enough, long enough, in which the dry components of the ink, the resins, have overabsorbed the liquids and then burned off some of those liquids. In essence, it's creating an unbalanced ink deposit, unbalanced solid formation, and it becomes brittle. That's what an overcure of the ink ends up looking like. The ink becomes brittle. It can snap. It feels hard, and you'll literally hear it snap. Now, there is another observable in which you can get the ink too hot, but not overcured. There are low cure inks on the market that have these blowing agents in them or other chemistry that when it gets too hot, they end up gassing out. The gas as it comes out as bubbles, and it creates what looks like little craters. Depending on how hot you get it for how long, it can start to look like, you know, lava and magma, which in itself looks really cool if you're planning for it and working with, you know, yellow to red shades. It's very interesting, but totally not what you want to have. So, overcure ink, yes. Almost nobody overcures ink. Do they get low bleed inks too hot? Yes, that's typically what you'll see when people are asking that question. It's a low cure ink, got it too hot, and you got a bunch of bubbles and magma looking ink. Good question. So if I keep a job and the screens that go along with it, and then set it up to reprint, how long will that screen last, and what is the best product to clean it up with? Okay, so two-pronged question. How long will a screen last if you are cataloging your screens? This is another term for it. Basically, you keep that job, you put it on the shelf, you take it down when you need to print it again. It's not encouraged for you to keep an image on screen, unless it's a one color or a design that has no real registration. You know, you've designed it so that colors are overlapping. That's how the design is. It can be, you know, out of register, but still look like it's in register. Over time, your screens are always going to relax, and any image that is on that screen will distort along with that mesh. Meaning that if you've got, let's just say it's a box, perfect. Everything is meant to, line up perfectly around the edges. Given enough time, it can be as little as 1 week, it can be as long as 1 month, it can be a couple of months. That box, one of those screens is going to end up elongating, and you're gonna have gaps and overlaps as a result. It's always recommended and encouraged to reclaim those screens within a short period of time so that those tight designs can stay and register. If it's a loose registration, yeah, go ahead, save it, put it back up on press, print away. As it loses tension, increase your off contact to compensate for that. Then at some point you're gonna find the screen is just simply not as useful. Other part of that question is the cleaning product. And this itself is a two-pronged question. So as you are printing a job, cleaning the screen, putting the job up, cleaning the screen, that repeated agitation of the cleaning of the screen is going to wear away at that emulsion. It's all on a very small level and it's cumulative over time. So if you just clean it and set it up again, you're really not going to notice anything. But by that 3rd, 4th, 10th time, again, depends on some variables, you're going to notice that your edge quality of that screen is starting to get a little softer. Anything that had really good sharp edges, like a Lego brick on top of a Lego brick, kind of good sharp edges, is now rounded, and the ink is flowing a little bit because of that. And it's just maybe a little mushy, and then over time it's gonna get mushier and mushier. How fast that screen degrades is going to depend on the emulsion that you're using and how well that screen was exposed initially, or how durable that emulsion is going to be during that cleaning process. Okay, now the cleaning chemistry to use. If you are doing the same color in that screen over and over, you can use press wash. It's gonna be just fine. If it's a screen in which you're going to change colors on it, you're going to want to start that cleaning process with an ink degrader, which is more oily and leaves an oily residue. Like the multi-purpose from Easyway that we sell, or a similar product to that IR26 from Saudi. It's going to pull the pigment out of the knuckles of the mesh so that if you last printed red ink, and now you're going to print white ink the next time, you don't end up with a little bit of pink in your white because that red pigment will stay in the knuckles of the mesh if you use a press wash. It doesn't come completely clean, but if you use an ink degradant, then it comes much cleaner, meaning that your odds of seeing red in the white on your next print are greatly diminished. Now, of course, because there's oily residue, you do want to come back with either a press wash, again, something that evaporates very quickly to clean up that oil. You can use alcohol, or you can simply rinse it down with water and then catalog that screen. Of course, if your stencil is water resistant. So this next question is around DTF, direct to film or digital film transfers. As you know, we've been diving into that a lot more here. It is absolutely a part of this industry now. It's not going away. And the question is very screen print related. DTF, is it as durable as screen printing? Let's break this down a little bit. Screen printing, if you properly cure the ink on the garment, meaning that the ink has hit temperature all the way through from top to bottom, and then that ink layer has actually held at or above cure temperature for 10 seconds, that print is going to last a very, very long time. There's a difference between the ink just hitting cure and holding at cure temperature over time. We're increasing the ink's durability and resistances the longer it's at cure. And of course, we're not talking about spiking temperatures. We already covered that. We're talking about holding at temperature. So that increases it. Because of that, we know that we're going to see different levels of durability in our screen printed garments over time. It's going to be the same thing with digital film transfers. So there's a couple of things to understand within that world. Why and how does a transfer stick to the garment? It's not the ink. The ink itself is not sticking to the garment. Screen printed transfers, it's never been the ink sticking to the garment. Any kind of transfer you've done, it's never been that ink. It's always been the glue, that hot melt powder that's on all these transfers. That is the only medium keeping the garment and the transfer together over time. So within that world, it's like how long does it last? Well, how good is the hot melt glue that you're using, that powder? So when you start to talk about the powders used in that world of adhering a design to a garment, you have this wide range. You have extremely soft and flexible powders that, because they're so soft and can move and bend, they don't have the greatest durability, meaning that in a wash test, they're going to be the first to start to delaminate, to pull off of the garment, or the whatever that ink is starts to come off of that adhesive. The harder that adhesive is, the more durable it is. And that means that the print is going to stay on that for a longer period of time. So you have these two extremes, oh, this feels amazing and so soft, and well, I don't really like how this feels, but I know it's going to be on that product for a very long time. Longer than is truly necessary for the lifespan of that product. And in that we have a wide range that we can choose from as decorators. That if you have a DTF machine, you can go and source different powders, different hardnesses and softnesses. As long as you heat press correctly, you follow the instructions to apply heat to the transfer, the glue gets hot enough to melt, adhere to the ink, and then adhere to the garment, and then we pull off the carrier sheet, and then we do another press to make sure that everything melts and grabs together properly without excessive pressure, because excessive pressure can actually cause that adhesive to drive into the fabric and away from that ink layer, the actual transfer that we want on the garment. So as long as you're doing that, the durability level, how long they last, is fairly comparable. Now, over time, the digital film transfer is not going to get any softer. Over time, plastisol can get a little bit softer. And then depending on how you're washing it, the screen printed ink can end up getting harder over time because somebody washed it in hot water and dried it in hot, and then that heat is damaging the ink over time. And then that damage over time is very similar to, the dashboard of a car sitting out in the summer heat in the middle of Kansas, and it's just getting baked on. And then it starts to crack because it's so dry and it has no suppleness to it. Both of those things can happen to both prints, but you're going to see it mostly with the plastisol print. So again, over time, are they comparable? Yeah, they're comparable as long as they're all done correctly. Can you mix dip tank solution and ink wash or any ink cleaning chemistry? The short answer is yes. The long answer is yes if you want your dip tank solution to last for 24 hours. So the reason for that is stencil remover, dip tank solution. It is an acidic formulation. There is a specific pH balance that you have to maintain in that tank or while you're applying it in order for it to work. That's not just the active chemical, it causes it to not be able to work properly. In that, if you can't get your stencil to break down, there's no point. Does it work short term? Absolutely. So if you've got a batch that you're going to be able to use for 12 hours and you want to put your ink cleaning solution in there, absolutely, you can. When you come in tomorrow, it's not going to work. But in that conversation, you got to put a lot in. This isn't just oops, I accidentally, spilled a little in there. Or I just cleaned 100 screens. I have a little bit of residue from the cleaning solution on my screen, and then I put that into the dip tank. Is that going to damage my dip tank? The short answer is no. No, it's not. There's not enough volume there of the ink cleaning solution to damage any of the stencil remover solution. Whether that's in a dip tank, spray on, whatever, it's not going to hurt it. We're talking about adding a gallon, 2 gallon of ink cleaning solution into a dip tank. There's got to be a large volume there in order for it to actually damage what's going on. Can there be a minor degradation if you have, let's just say, 10 ounces, 5 ounces left over on 100 screens that you just cycled through? Yes, technically there can be a minor degradation to the effectiveness. But if you just went through 100 screens in a dip tank, you're going to follow that up with replacing all the water that you just pulled out and the appropriate amount of stencil remover. So you're already pulling out so much stencil remover in that process that you're replacing anything that it could actually start to damage. That volume just starts changing. And it's nothing you need to worry about. Last one. So this came from a conversation that took place, probably, I think it was one of the shorts that we put out on the separating blends and then printing them wet on wet to get a good effect. And it's about print order for wet on wet colors. So the first thing I want to say, any rules you hear in this industry about print order, they're meant to be broken. There are no rules, there are only suggestions. So in this, do what you see works best on the shirt. What's going to follow are suggestions and things that you will do to adjust and modify. Print order should be smallest area to largest area. And if you are doing spot color printing, lightest ink color to darkest ink color. If you are doing color blending and like sim process, you want to go most opaque color to most translucent color, because you want that translucent color to sit on top of the opaque color to create your secondary, tertiary colors. All that color blending, you want that to happen with the translucent colors on top. If you print a yellow first and then a red on top of it for blending to create an orange, that red is way too opaque. That's gonna just destroy and cover up that yellow or that gold shade that it's mixing with. But if you reverse that and print that yellow on top of it, because that gold or yellow shade has so much translucency, the light can go through it really easy and come back out, you're gonna get beautiful shades of orange. Now, with that, people go, but red picks up, red's so difficult to control. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Red is difficult to control. Out of all the colors, that's the most visually challenging color there is. So putting that later in the sequence, you can absolutely do that. But you have to work harder to control the dots in that red so it looks right and blends right than you do if you print the other way around. So can you do it? Absolutely. You just work differently. Now in that, it's gonna sound like, oh, well, I print my dark colors first, light colors last. Not necessarily. Let's take the example of, a light blue and a dark blue. Dark blue like an ultramarine or navy, and then a light blue like, light blue, PMS 311, 312. If I'm printing like a royal blue shade over in a light blue shade and getting those color blendings, say on a sim process design, I'm gonna print my light blue first because it has a lot of white in that ink. And my royal blue shade 286, 285, whatever that is for you, 072, that one has a lot of translucency to it. When you print it, you see color shift. So printing that over that light blue is going to give me better results from a color blending point of view than if I printed that light blue. Going dark colors to light colors. Everything changes based on what the intent is. I've just got a bunch of flat spot colors, print lights to darks, because those dark colors at the end are going to matte the fibers better. When it comes to washability, the fibers coming through, that fibrillation, the loosening of the fibers during agitation in the wash, that's where having a dark color later in the sequence works better than having it early in the sequence. Early in the sequence, you don't have enough color there, typically matting down and holding down the fibers, so you get more contrast from the fibers coming loose if it's printed early in the sequence like that. And that's gonna do it for another deep dive with Colin, Q&A style. Hey, if you guys have more questions, don't be afraid to ask. Throw them down in the comments. Throw them up on the social posts. Throw them on the shorts. We're collecting all of those, and we'll do another Q&A once we have 7 to 12 of those, just like we did here today. As always, thank you for watching. We always appreciate your viewership. Like and subscribe. If you found something in here that's going to be important to a friend of yours in the industry, shoot that over to them. There's a lot of people doing DFT right now. Talk to them about the durability thing. Thank you all for watching. See you in the next one. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 blah.